Hey guys, we are back with another commentary. This one's going to be for Underrot 20. We completed this on the start of the first fort week of the season. This was actually with like more or less of a pre-made group, so unlike the Neltharian's Lair I talked about the other day, this is with, I'm in Discord with these players. A few of them have 4 sets as well, and fairly higher item level, so we're going to actually breeze through this run. It'll be a 2 chest pretty comfortably, but I want to talk about my route and kind of our general like thinking throughout the dungeon and what we're like prioritizing. So to start off this run on a fortified week, we like to lust early on to get an extra lust out of the dungeon if possible. So we're going to be pulling this maggot on the right into the matron into the priest pack here with lust, and we're going to make sure that we're popping all our cooldowns. We're going to start with dampen plus weapons of order. The big thing here is making sure you're not getting hit by the rotten bile from the maggot. If you can have someone lock it down with stuns, that's preferred. And then the priority kill here would definitely be the priest. Gift of Cahoon does go off there, but we already talked about it and we knew it was going to be going off, and we were just going to wait for a purge from the trank shot or blood elf racial from myself. Unfortunately, our warrior went down there. I think he went down to the slash from the matron, the frontal cleave. Once again, maggot does its thing. I paralysis on it to stop the frontal. And again, now the big thing here is we're just trying to look out for the matron's frontal savage cleave, I think it's what it's called. On this week, it's definitely very punishing. Also, the headhunters are root players, so you kind of need to be careful and ready for it to use either a big defensive, especially once it's bolstered, or making sure you have some type of way to get out of roots. Next, we're going to just pull this pack here. Our Feral Druid opened up a little early on the priest. I wanted it to be up at the hill just in case, because I don't want to pull those ticks off to the left-hand side. And again, priority here is going to be priest over matron. Matron, again, is avoidable. Blood bolts are going to do a lot more damage to players, as well as the Dark Reconstruction or Reconstitution. I forgot what it's called exactly, but Dark Recon will full heal a mob that it goes on, so you want to be super, super careful of that. The new affix is pretty easy to avoid. As you saw, I just broke it with Chi Torpedo. Tiger's Lust also works for Brewmaster monks. There's the Dark Recon, we get the kick, and then we get the kill. So the new affix is pretty easy to deal with. It's just as simple as either roll out of it or Tiger's Lust it off. Sometimes you might not have Tiger's Lust if you're using it to avoid other mechanics like roots and stuff, but if you do have it, you can pretty much keep mobs still if you'd like. Once that pull goes down, we're going to start heading down the hill. Now the priority in this pack is going to... So our group prefers targeting the priest, but I think we're going to end up killing them at an even time. And luckily, the Dark Omen goes on me first, so I'm going to pop a... Actually, I don't think I pop anything here. I have Dampen available, but I think I'm going to hold it. The Dark Omen is a lot of damage, and you don't want to make... You want to make sure you're not cleaving other players with it. It looks like we are actually focusing the Defiled Spirit. I thought we were going to focus the Priest here, but I guess we ended up doing the Spirit instead. The Spirit does a lot of damage if you miss kick. The only thing that the Priest does that is really scary are those Blood Bolts, but it's kind of like pick your poison. Do you want the Befouled Spirit up longer, or do you want the Priest up longer? Though everything actually kind of died at an even time. We get the Touch of Death. Oh no, never mind. I'm dumb. Touch of Death comes out on one of the Hunters, and then we're going into first boss. The big thing here is just making sure you're kicking, and kicking properly. So our Feral Druid opened with kick, though typically tank I always think should, but this boss is fairly easy, honestly. Just don't get hit by anything is kind of the name of the game here. This is a boss that the healer either has to do an insane amount of healing or no healing at all. And as for a tank, there's not really a strategy to really like help yourself or your group. It's just, the biggest thing that I do here is I call out kick rotations and kick orders. I'll say, you know, I'll get next boss, this person, you know, you and you get next ad. And it's pretty chill. As you can see, our Hunter did get hit by 1 bolt. I think it went off because we had no kicks available. So he had that nasty absorption shield. It also has a dot application effect to it. So you want to make sure that the healer is getting rid of that shield as soon as possible. The only time that this fight gets scary is when there's an add up and they both cast Creeping Rot at the same time, because it's kind of hard to see the direction that the frontal is facing, especially when there's 2 of them. But it's as simple as just like walking behind. So we got a kick there on the add from our Feral Druid. I'll get boss here, and then again just watching the frontal. And then we're going to get another frontal from the boss. So we just have to kind of keep our eyes open, make sure you're kind of avoiding the green at all costs, and of course not getting hit by Sanguine. The Sanguine Feast has a range of only 4 yards, so you can still melee it. You just need to make sure that you're at max range. Now this next little part, you definitely want to skip. I see a lot of pugs going to the right here. We prefer going through like this. We grab these rots. The rots are only scary if you get hit by the swirl, which I can't remember if someone does in this run. I've done a lot of Underrots since this key, so I'm trying to remember when exactly that happened. Now in this poll, there's two things that are going on. The rots, we don't need to worry about. So the only two things that we are looking at are the purple marked Lasher and the star marked Bloodswarmer. The Lasher, we're having our warrior just watch and make sure that he's always kicking, and then everyone else is focusing the Swarmer. The Swarmer is annoying because it fixates a mob, and especially on a week like this where it's bolstering and fortified, this mob can get extremely deadly. And of course our hunter goes down to the swirl, not the action. It might have overlapped with melee, but I think he got hit by the swirl there. So this pack is deleted. Our hunter did release, so he's now running back. And because he's running back, I'm going to keep this pull a little bit smaller. Typically, this is a more aggressive pull. I'm trying to split the Lasher from the Bloodswarmer, which I'm going to end up body pulling. Because about 3 seconds later, I forgot that I even used the Ring of Peace, and the Swarmer was just right there on top of us. So now, this point, this is a pretty scary pull because we have Maggots with the frontal. We have the Lasher who can basically stun people for 12 seconds or whatever it is. And then we also have double Swarmer who are fixating our warrior right now. Warriors are luckily pretty tanky. Now, if you are going to kite out these mobs, you want to make sure you're not running further than 10 yards away. Because if you're running from 10, like if you're further than 10 yards out, the Swarmers will charge to you. But if you're between 5 to 10 yards, they won't melee you, but they also will be chasing you. So you can kind of kite them out and outrun them. Typically, this will always be best when it's on a range. Now, unfortunately, we did miss the bile there, and that's what ended up getting our healer. So we're going to get a quick res, and then we'll continue on our way. So not the cleanest execution of that pull, or these two pulls, but we're still looking really good on time. I did a video on this last week about my routing through here. Generally, my routing is very W, but in this area, I like to always try to group up 5 mobs at a time, 5 to 6 mobs, because that's the most optimal kind of cleave range for most players. For example, Fury Warrior typically cleaving 5 targets, unless they're like playing Ravage or something like that. Hunters always benefit from having 3 or more targets, and then same with the Feral Druid. They get a little bit of priority damage, as well as their damage scales really well into larger pulls because of their damage profile being mostly bleeds. Now, unfortunately, here's another mistake that's about to come out. I see Bile. I actually Ring of Peace, the Bloodswarming Fixate, onto our healer, and I get her killed. So that was not the play. A small mistake here. Another thing, we could have just avoided the frontal as well. Back in the day, back in my day, in BFA, the maggots didn't have a frontal animation, so you always had to kind of pay attention to where they were facing, and it was hard to see because they look like a piece of shit. So you want to you used to have to kind of really pay attention to where they were facing, but now with a nice big green animation, it's kind of easy to see. So if you don't have a stop for it, it's not the worst thing in the world. You just want to make sure you're avoiding it at all costs. One last thing I forgot to mention about the Bloodswarmer, which isn't really important for our composition, is that it will cast the Sonic Screech, which will interrupt players if they're caught casting. So for our guard, for pretty much our entire comp, that doesn't really affect them outside of our Resto Druid, but our Resto Druid is often cat weaving and using Hots to heal the group, which are typically instant cast spells. So not a big thing for the Resto Druid either. We got a good fear on that maggot there, and then we're chilling. Once again, with it being Fort week, I'm being really aggressive with my defensive cooldowns. As soon as they come up, I'm typically hitting them between Fort and Damp and Harm. I mentioned that in the Neltharion video. It's pretty safe to just rotate between the two, and making sure that you're using them at higher health instead of lower health. Now, the strategy I like to use for Cragmaw is that we keep him in the middle of the room. And the main reason for that is, while it is nicer to keep him up against a wall or up against that rib cage to specifically to keep tick stacked during his charge, it makes Tantrum a little bit more difficult to manage because regardless of where you tank him, he will always return to the center of the room to do Tantrum. So if you're over all the way in the corner by the rib cage and there's things spawning in that adjacent corner, it's pretty hard to get there without speedy classes. Now again, I am playing Brewmaster with Chi Torpedo. Another ability that I picked up in this dungeon because I like having the extra little movement speed for how big this place is. It's pretty important to be able to spread out here and make sure that you're getting all the ticks. So that's why I like to tank him in the middle of the room generally. There's arguments for both, but I've just, way back in the day, I remember having an issue with doing the ribcage strat. Now we do have 1 tick coming in here, not a big deal. The bleed is very dangerous for a tank to have on them, especially once it starts getting high, but if you have Touch of Death like I do here, it goes down really, really quick. Also, this frontal can be outranged if you just run backwards. Kind of a nice little trick. Most tanks can do it, but not all tanks can do it every time. It's a little bit tighter for certain classes like DK and Paladin. And you kind of want to save your movement speed for the tantrum phase. So another reason why I like to take Chi Torpedoes, because you not only is the roll further, but I get a little bit of a movement speed afterwards, so I don't have to waste Tiger's Lust, or I only have to use one charge of the Chi Torpedo. I'll have my talent build down below. I forgot to mention that at the start. Once the boss is this low, though, we're going to actually just commit to a tunnel here. We still have to dodge the charge, like we can't tunnel that hard that we ignore this mechanic, but we basically dodge the frontal, and then ticks don't really matter if we don't step on them, because the boss is dead. Perfect. And Lust is now just coming up on Fortified Week for this 20, so we're going to actually Lust this next pull onto the Grotesque Hooer. We just want to make sure that we're watching the Death Speaker. He has one cast, I think it's called Wicked Frenzy. Our Warrior's going to get that, and then we're going to open him up with a few stuns on the Hooer, and then start getting into our kick rotation here. So I'm going to go first. I think then our Feral Druid goes next, followed by our Hunter. And then making sure that we're purging off these shields whenever we can. So Trank Shot, Blood Elf Racial. I think I'm saving Racial for the next pull. Just because we had Lust here, I felt like the shield was going to go down really quick. But now we'll have double Blood Elf Racial for the next pull, which will be pretty useful. We got a Trank Shot on that. Beautiful. And then we're rolling into this next pack. Again, Death Speaker here is the priority. He casts Wicked Frenzy. And outside of that, there's nothing really to do here. We're going to save our Blood Elf Shield for when there's two. There's two active now. And now there's 4 active, and we are going to give them the big suck. And now we're good. These mobs mostly do physical damage, why they're pretty attractive for tanks to pull. So it's very easy for, you know, almost any tank to actually manage these mobs. And realistically, we probably could have chained this into the next pull as well. But with it being Bolstering Week, I kind of wanted to stay away from that. But we are just actually tearing through this trash. Trank Shot goes out on the last one, and we are set. This next pull. If you're in Discord, or you can communicate this beforehand, but having a kick order, you need 2 kicks per mob. It doesn't matter if it's range or melee, you basically just need the 2 kicks. So I think it's me and the Hunter on blue, and it's our Hunter and our Feral Druid on the next. And then the last big thing is just making sure you're dodging these totems. The totems now have a shown range, which is super nice. Back in BFA, they did not. So now it's kind of nice to be able to see where the range is, so you don't have to guess. And I think we missed the kick here because our Feral Druid is not paying attention. So we do have 1 stack, but we decide that it's not worth really waiting for it to fall off because it's only 10% less damage. Yeah, it kind of hurts, but it's only for 9 seconds. And it's not like we're lusting or anything like that. So the strategy for this, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I prefer... It really depends, actually. So the shockwave, the first shockwave is always weird because the shrooms are still kind of spawning. Because I have a poisonous spell or a diseases spell, I'm going to actually be able to step on 2 of them and then dispel myself. We're now going to dodge these balls. I get hit by 1 though. We're going to get the second. We're going to dispel. And then we're going to face this at the next mushroom pack. So what I do basically is I face the boss 1 direction and then I turn him 180 degrees. Entangling comes out. Entangling is actually kind of a pain on this fight. And then it's really just important that we're making sure that we're watching these orbs and not picking up any disease stacks because we don't have a disease spell outside of myself. Which, of course, I can always dispel myself, but I can't really dispel 4 people. So we're going to try to keep that to a minimum. The group does a really good job there not getting hit. And then kind of rinse and repeat here. Luckily, it's Fortified Week, so this is much easier. Also, melee should always go far. Never try to pop close because there is travel time. So if you try to go close, you're going to get hit by the upheaval, which could kill you depending on your gear and key level. Now, as a Brewmaster monk, I like to try to utilize my detox for this. If you pop a defensive like Dampen Harm or Diffuse Magic or even Fortifying Brew, step on a few of the mushrooms and then detox yourself. It's a very, very easy way to clear mushrooms without having to rely on upheaval. So we have 2 more across the room. I'm going to grab them again, dispel myself, and then Entangling comes out. I really like the new Entangling effects. It's always, even on PTR it was really fun, but on this, like, now that it's live and we're playing with it, I think it's a great replacement for Quaking. Like, it's not as punishing as Quaking was. Like, yeah, you can get stunned, but like there is counterplay to it. There are a few really odd overlaps in some instances, that boss in particular, but for the most part, not too bad. Here we're pulling 1 Hooer and a Defiler. Defiler, the most important thing you can kick is the Shadowbolt Volley. And actually, well, the Withering Curse is pretty important too. But the Grotesque Horror luckily can get stunned, just like I did from that Entangling, because I kind of forgot to move. The other problem though is like the Grotesque Hooer, if you kick it as the tank's not in melee range, it'll melee a random party member. So you kind of want to try to stay. I could have transcended though. Once the Defiler goes down, just because it's Bolstering week, we'll go into the next poll. If it wasn't Bolstering week, I would for sure chain this. For those who haven't earned Underrot, this worm used to not be here before, but now it is. So we have to just make sure we're kicking this. Warrior's watching the Wicked Frenzy, and then all the rest of us are watching this Hooer. Again, this pull doesn't hurt too much. We're actually sitting on a lot of our defenses. We could probably Fort Brew if we get scared, but I think we're just giga chilling. And now when it comes to percent in this place, we are going to end up pulling in 2 of these giant faceless behemoths walking around the area. Do we have Blood Elf Racial here? I don't think so. We're not doing it. So I'm going to pull this guy in. This was a mistake because now he is going to be 4 times bolstered. Luckily, bolstering no longer increases his health, but it does increase the damage they deal still. So he has 80% more damage right now. So as long as we don't get hit, we should be good. And then when bolstering starts to drop here, I'm going to pull the other Faceless Corruptor. It's coming in. Now at this point, like I'm okay with the bolstering on these mobs, mostly because all of their damage outside of their melee hits are avoidable. These are the kind of things that you have to think about on Bolstering week as a tank is, because it's only a damage increase, is it going to negatively impact my group, or is it something that I can handle and it's really only going to be an issue on the tank? Like, and this is a perfect example of that. Chaining with this, as long as we now focus the Hooer, we should be fine. Frontal Fear coming out, and then of course, you don't want to get hit by that. Making sure we have like a general kick order, and then also this Dark Echoes needs to be kicked ASAP. As you can tell, it just did half of our health. And that was without bolstering, so imagine if it had a bolstering stack. The Dark Echoes is really scary. It's also a fairly fast cast, so whoever's going to kick it needs to be very, very quick. Good reaction time. It's actually a very good frozen trap. I didn't even realize that during the run. It's pretty cool. And we are pretty much perfect on percent. So we're going to now pull these 2 Corruptors onto Worm. We're going to focus the Worm, and this should set up a... Once we get this pack down, it'll put us in a very nice situation, or a very nice position to capitalize on that and get a 2 chest. Dark Echoes goes off. We get a kick before anything happens. We're dodging Fear. Luckily, it's a 90-degree angle on that. So we had a lot of room to dodge there. The Horror will go down into now just the double Corruptor. So we're just going to cleave here. Basically, the name of the game is don't be where you were whenever these tentacles spawn. And then, of course, dodge the Maddening Gaze. Now, this is a 180 split, but luckily we're up against a wall, so not too difficult. Really good baits by the group, though, by the way. Taking him in this corner is not the best thing. Like, we want as much room as possible to dodge these. So I should have pulled him out after the worm died a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Touch of Death goes out, and now we're just waiting. So we have 6 minutes to 2 chest. We're in a really, really comfortable spot, and we'll have Lust come up at the very end of the fight if we want it or need it. It's always funny to watch this boss be done in pugs, because pugs have no idea how to do this fight, especially for people who didn't play in BFA. Now, the general strategy for this fight is basically stand on the tank and run through his legs whenever he casts the frontal. That's it. Like, that's the fight. This is one of the easier boss fights in this dungeon. There is a little bit of a higher HPS check, but because of the nature of the fight and how stacked your group should be, it's very, very easy. So here we are running through. I'm going to go a little bit further just to get him past these pools. And then as soon as he has enough room between him and the pools, we're going to just turn him around facing that like pool of corruption again. And that's it. This is the whole fight. His autos can hurt once you have higher stacks, so feel free to use diffuse magic to remove those stacks. Now, it's really strange because the stacks, or like the stacks of your debuff will get reapplied to the boss, the Abomination here, but oddly enough, it like whenever I look at details, it doesn't show. So I'm not sure if it's a bug for details or if the diffuse magic dot to the boss doesn't do anything. But if you are ever in a kind of a scary situation, or you missed the cleanse for some reason, or your healer is obviously busy, feel free to use diffuse magic. And honestly, with how long this fight is, you can use it pretty aggressively. You can use it probably earlier on and then later in the fight. I'm setting on both dampen and diffuse right now. Entangling comes out. We're gonna actually wait. Actually no, we just Tiger Slits that. Boom, easy. Now that was unfortunately a bad bait because of entangling, and that's why this affix is sometimes a little rough in these dungeons. And we're looking good. Now, if you notice my positioning, I'm kind of positioning a little to the left or a little bit more towards the center of the room. And that's because Rushing Jade Wind is just this aura that will automatically kill spores whenever they're within range, which is really, really convenient. Instead of having to like have DPS kind of every once in a while throw some abilities out there, my aura is now going to just instantly kill them as soon as they come near us. If you ever do mess up a frontal though, don't be afraid to move the boss really far. The pools on the ground eventually turn into the spores. That's where they're coming from. So every once in a while, they kind of like pick themselves back up, they regenerate, and then they turn into these spores and they start following you. So the room does get cleared eventually if you mess up a frontal at some point. So don't be afraid to run far. But again, here's that Rushing Jade Wind. Just you can see as soon as the spores get within range, it's instantly killing them here. And now that the boss is dead, we are just, yeah, tunneling the visages and killing it. And that's the key. Pretty good run. 120k overall from both our Feral and our Warrior. And then our Hunter, unfortunately, at the very start of the dungeon, he lusted that first pull and then he dipped. That hurt his overall a little bit, but I think the Warrior had 4-set, the Feral did not. And yeah, we're just chilling. So yeah, that's our 2 chests at Underrot and how we did it and the things to look out for. Hope you guys enjoyed. Good luck this week. Bolstering Fortified is like a Hellspawn affix combination, so yeah, just pray to God, I guess. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.